Hello everyone, this is Dalister and welcome to another episode review of Dark Side of the Ring, Episode 5. Today's episode focuses on the life and career of the Junkyard Dog. I don't know much about the Junkyard Dog, other than him being in the WWE Hall of Fame, but he looked like a strong wrestler back in the day, especially with the chains around his neck. We'll learn a lot of new things in this episode of who was the Junkyard Dog. Junkyard Dog's real name was Sylvester Ritter, who grew up in a small town called Wadesboro, North Carolina. I'll call Junkyard Dog, JYD, or Sylvester, just in case you guys get so confused on who I'm talking about. At the end of this episode, we get a speech from Ernie Ladd, who was a wrestler, booker, and a philosopher from the Mid-South. He describes JYD as someone with style, attributes, and a representation of the people. Sylvester, aka Junkyard Dog's story was one from rags to riches. His childhood home was small and not so homely, as he had to pee in a bucket and do the number 2 in a bush since he did not have a bathroom. We see the actual house towards the end of this episode, and it looks cramped but filled with pictures of the family through the years on the inside, especially JYD's time in wrestling. Sylvester grew up without a father his entire life, but was raised by his grandmother, who taught him how to treat people better and equally. The mother of his daughter was also raised by his grandma, and Sylvester eventually had his daughter, whose name is Latoya. Sylvester's nephew also lived with Sylvester, who is named Jarvis. Jarvis would call Sylvester Uncle Dog. Although Sylvester has done drugs before, he told Jarvis to not do the same thing as he did. Sylvester used to play football, but eventually stuck to wrestling. He felt really bad for leaving his family and daughter behind, as Junkyard Dog had to be on the road a lot in order to wrestle. Before he was Junkyard Dog, he was a rookie named Big Daddy Ritter in the 1970s at Stampede Wrestling. Around that time, wrestling was considered a white man's sport. Watts told his booker, Ernie Ladd, to look for a charismatic wrestler, and he brought in JYD. Junkyard Dog was not a good technical wrestler, but he clicked with the audience immediately. Bill Watts gave Junkyard Dog a chance to wrestle, as other companies did not give JYD a chance because he was black. Audiences saw Junkyard Dog as a hero to the working class and was beloved by New Orleans. While he was charismatic in the 80s, JYD was not as strong as some of the other wrestlers, so Bill Watts created matches to fit JYD's wrestling style in order for JYD to win. Watts did a lot for Sylvester in order to be this big superstar, as he brought in future WWE Hall of Famer Ted DiBiase to feud with JYD and work together to make JYD look good while wrestling. Bill Watts had a rule that if you get beat up at a bar, you were immediately fired, so he wasn't the kind of guy to mess around with. Sylvester eventually became really good friends with Ted, that JYD became Ted's best man for his wedding. Even his friendship with Watts was close, so that if JYD did not like anything, Watts would do anything to accommodate the problem for JYD. A storyline with the Freebirds caused a ruckus between the audience and the Freebirds. The Freebirds would bring in hair cream to put on their opponents, but they accidentally put the cream on JYD's eyes. It was a storyline to make JYD blind and that he wouldn't be able to see his daughter grow up. Some fans took this seriously, that they believed in it and wanted to kill the Freebirds. In one show, JYD was sitting with the audience as he watched the Freebirds wrestling while allegedly blind. JYD gets told by a fan that they'll solve the problem and pulls out a gun, which puts Junkyard Dog in a sticky situation as to whether to do nothing or tell the fan that he's faking his blindness for a wrestling storyline. Luckily, the cops came to the scene and arrested the fan, which shows how big of a star and beloved Junkyard Dog was. As a matter of fact, JYD became a huge star and a main eventer in Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and anywhere else in Mid-South. In return, JYD gave money to the kids in need, and a city dedicated a day for JYD. He was the Black Hulk Hogan of wrestling, as said by Coco, and Jim Ross called him charismatic as well. Junkyard Dog even gave one of his chains to a fan, yet fame never changed him. With fame came some guilt, as Sylvester felt awful about being absent from his family, especially his daughter Latoya. He experimented with drugs such as sleeping pills and speed alongside Jake the Snake Roberts, who was also battling drug addiction. Tony Atlas said in the episode that Sylvester paid for Tony's drugs so that he can use them as well. In one incident, Junkyard Dog got involved with 3 groupies, and one of these groupies had a husband who knocked on the door while JYD and the groupies were in a room. JYD managed to take on the husband and knocked him down cold. In the summer of 1984, Vince McMahon gives JYD a high offer of pay to join the WWF. At first, Junkyard Dog wanted to stay with Watts' company, but an incident changed his mind. It wasn't the money that caused JYD to leave, but rather he heard Watts talking badly about him in the bathroom without Watts knowing that JYD was in the bathroom stalls. Allegedly, JYD was doing his business in the toilet and overheard Watts and a guy named Gridley Smith having a conversation. They did not notice that JYD was in there, so Smith asks Watts if he thinks that JYD was leaving, and Watts tells him that word won't be leaving them. This angers JYD and he immediately leaves to join WWF. Bill Watts was brokenhearted when JYD left and ranted in a Mid-South promo of how hurt he was about JYD leaving, even crying about it too. This episode, Watts denies ever saying the N-word to JYD through subtitles as he was interviewed. He quoted that it was complete fiction. Watts tried to fill JYD's spot by putting another black superstar over, such as George Wells, Brickhouse Brown, and Snowman Butch Reed, but none could replace JYD's. Going to WWF, JYD was welcomed with open arms and excitement by the audience. He was featured in the cartoons and had an album which did not turn out so great as heard in this episode, but he did gain some popularity in WWF. As days went by, JYD struggled to retain his glory as he once did in Mid-South Wrestling. Jarvis thinks that the audience in WWF at the time were not ready for a black wrestler to be put over. Coco mentions in this episode that JYD thought Vince was going to push Junkyard Dog like Watts did in Mid-South, but it did not happen, and JYD felt like he let his family and every one of his fans down. This affected Junkyard Dog badly since WWF barely pushes their black wrestlers. When you think about it, he barely pushes his black wrestlers such as Shelton Benjamin, MVP, Apollo Crews, Keith Lee, and he barely pushed Bobby Lashley on his second run. Tony said that during the era of Vince McMahon Sr., there were a lot of minorities before Vince Jr. took over, such as Pedro Morales, Bruno Sammartino, Rocky Johnson, the Wild Samoans, Mr. Fuji, and Bob Backlund, that represented each ethnic group. He also said that there was only one white man. When Vince Jr. took over, only white superstars such as Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, and Bret Hart. Vince Jr. allegedly had the black wrestlers push Caucasian wrestlers. Tony said it wasn't a racist decision that Vince made, but that Vince wanted more white fans. Vince hardly used JYD in the WWF, which caused JYD to turn to drugs such as pot and cocaine. Coke was an addictive drug for JYD as he took it every day. His addiction got the best of him as JYD became more depressed and appeared bloated in his promos. JYD would smoke pipes, but his drug habits caught up to him as he was let go of WWF because he no-showed a lot. After being let go, JYD worked in small high school gyms, but eventually got offered the chance to join WCW, where his old boss Bill Watts was in charge of the company at the time. Sadly, it only lasted for a while. Jake the Snake Roberts said in the episode that the last time he saw JYD was in 1995. JYD did not say bye to Jake or acknowledge him, as if JYD's consumption of drugs took over his social skills as well. JYD spent his money fast and eventually hit rock bottom. Once the fame ended, JYD worked at a part-time job at a Walmart, which isn't all that bad, but for JYD, it was probably embarrassing since he was a famous wrestler beloved by audiences and ended up working at a job much lower ranking with low pay. He used to make $8,000 to $10,000 a week. Tony Atlas says that when he himself hit rock bottom, he tried to take his life because he ended up homeless at one point. For Ted DiBiase, he became a speaker to audiences in churches and school assemblies in order to encourage others. One day, Ted gets a call from his closest friend, JYD, encouraging Ted to tell the kids to not follow the path that JYD did, which was his addiction. It was sadly one of the last conversations Ted had with his best man from one of his weddings. On the last days of JYD's life, he tried to go to his daughter's high school graduation because he was so proud of her, and she was his only child. He tried to drive there from Mississippi to North Carolina, but the drive there was too far, and JYD missed it. JYD took a picture with Jarvis's newborn son, and that was the last picture he took before his death. Jarvis and JYD went to a gas station, and Jarvis saw all the puke in JYD's car. Jarvis told JYD to stay in a hotel to get some rest before going back to Mississippi. Sylvester refuses and drives off. It was the last conversation Jarvis had with his Uncle Dog. On June 1st, 1998, Sylvester was killed while going home from his daughter's graduation. He had driven all night long with no seatbelt because of his weight not fitting the belt. Sylvester died of head trauma. JYD's family and friends, while being interviewed, were really sad about his unexpected death. Ted thought JYD was going to get better, but it was too late when JYD died too soon. Jake, on the other hand, said that he was happy for JYD at the time because Jake too was suffering from drug addiction back then and just wanted the pain to be over. Lucky for Jake, he sobered up in the 2000s. In a clip, Bill Watts said that when JYD died, Bill cried. A couple years later, LaToya, Sylvester's only daughter, died of a ruptured heart at the age of 31. She did a lot of social work before she died and buried next to her father. Before LaToya's death, she and Booker Ernie inducted Junkyard Dog in the WWE Hall of Fame in 2004. Jarvis said that his mother raised LaToya as her daughter, but does not like talking about her after she had passed away because Jarvis's mother gets emotional talking about LaToya. The wrestlers who were interviewed for this episode praised JYD as he paved the way for the black community and created acceptance in a prejudiced world. Junkyard Dog's personality was organic with a real optimistic personality. His charisma inspired black and white people all the way to kids and the elderly. Ted said that when JYD called Ted, he told Ted to tell JYD's story, and at one point, Ted felt that the JYD he once knew was back. This episode also gives help if you are dealing with substance abuse or have a mental disorder. If you need help, visit www.samhsa.gov for free, confidential treatment referrals and information, or you can call SAMHSA National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP. But if you want the number version, it's 1-800-662-4357. It is available 24/7, but I would check the reviews in case you're wondering. Interviewers for this episode are Jim Ross, Teddy Long, Jake the Snake Roberts, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Coco Beware, the parrot guy in case you don't know, Tony Atlas, Ted DiBiase, Jim Cornette, and Jarvis Woodburn, the nephew of Junkyard Dog. My thoughts of this episode were mostly sad because of what JYD went through. I know for a fact in the 1900s it must have been hard for the black community to make a name for themselves in a world that's very prejudiced and judgmental. Nowadays we do see a little more diversity than ever, but still have a long way to go. I think that JYD's story should also be celebrated and paid attention a little bit more during Black History Month as well, because nowadays after 2020 there were a lot of black icons that were talked about on TikTok or any social media platform that I don't know about, or some of us probably don't know about either. I do feel bad that he fell into addiction. Fame is not easy, especially for wrestlers during the classic wrestling WWF days. Do I think Vince Jr. is racist? No, but he has done some things before that make him look like he might be. For example, when he allowed Triple H to do a promo with Booker T saying that people like Booker T don't become the champion. Then there was the promo he did with John Cena and Vince said the N-word just to be funny, but it was definitely not. There was also Crime Time, which I think they were a really great tag team. They kind of remind me of Street Profits. You know, Crime Time should have been pushed a little bit more, but they were like the stereotypes that black people were labeled back then. Most recently, when Sasha Banks and Naomi walked out on WWE because they did not like the direction Vince was going to give them. I also read an article recently that this writer who worked with WWE before was told by Vince to write Bianca Belair a promo. Allegedly, the writer said that Vince told them to have Bianca say ghetto or something like that. The fact that his father had all these minorities become big stars was a good idea, but Vince decided to have white men be the stars once he took over. Personally, I just think that Vince needs to throw in the towel and have some faith in Triple H and the future of WWE. There are a lot of wrestlers today who I feel deserve more attention than the ones Vince likes. Sadly, that's what happened to Junkyard Dog. Audiences loved him in Mid-South, but Vince didn't see it the way that everyone else saw it. I just feel like Vince should have learned his lesson for what he did to Junkyard Dog, but still lacks seeing a wrestler's full potential currently. It is also another reason why some wrestlers want to leave or have left WWE because Vince does not see what the audience sees, which is charisma or a connection some wrestlers have with the people. I was glad to know more about the Junkyard Dog and how inspired people of all types were really influenced by him. I hope that he and his daughter are in heaven, happy to be together. Anyway, I give this episode a 10 out of 10. What do you guys think? Were you influenced by Junkyard Dog or enjoyed it when he was on TV? Comment down below and please no negativity or bashing with each other, please. You know how us wrestling fans are. Anyway, thank you guys for watching and until next time, take care of yourself and the people you love. Bye guys.